I just want to preface this video by saying that the information included here has the potential to significantly improve both your quality of life and well-being in the coming years, with only 15 minutes of practice every couple of days. Only 15 minutes of your time. I know this sounds a bit far-fetched, but this is the reality of how powerful trauma work is, and particularly TRE, which I'll be covering in this video. I'm not going to ask you to pay for a course. I'm not even going to ask for your money. But what I am going to ask is that you go ahead and watch this video all the way through, so you can at least provide yourself with the opportunity to walk this path that will, as I said, greatly improve your life in the long run. Thank you for being here, my lovely viewer, and I do sincerely hope you gain a lot of value from this video. And if you have, please go ahead and share it with others too, because my goal here is to change lives. Anyway, on to the content. Perhaps you've had that experience in your life when you're actively trying to turn things around, you're actively trying to make things better, but nothing really seems to work. Perhaps you've gone to therapy, perhaps you've tried counselling, but it just doesn't seem to stick. You still feel burdened, you still feel like you're carrying a massive weight around, and honestly, it might feel overwhelming. I know that all too well. But here I'm trying to outline something that might actually allow you to alleviate that burden. Now, why do I say this? And why does it seem that therapy doesn't really work? Now, the reason why I believe this to be is because the most important level with which we should use to actually address our burdens or trauma appears to be at the level of the body itself. What's known as somatic trauma work, body-based trauma work. So what body-based modalities do, like TRE, as I'm going to introduce in this video, is actually resolve that trauma inside the body using movements, neurogenic tremors, that actually reach beneath the level of cognition, beneath even the ego itself, and allow you to resolve these trauma imprints for good. So talk therapy doesn't tend to complete the stress response in the way that is required to fully resolve trauma, because it tends to only work on the cognitive level, whereas TRE works on a deeper level inside the body itself and resolves the trauma at its root. Because what we experience in the mind, our anxieties, our worries, our insecurities, are a result of the trauma stored in our body. The mind is merely a symptom. Because as somatic trauma work emphasizes, the body and mind are deeply interlinked. The state of your mind is almost directly correlated with the state of your nervous system. So what is this practice that I've been bringing up? TRE, Tension and Trauma Release Exercises. This is a set of exercises that was developed by Dr. David Berceli to activate or relearn the neurogenic tremor mechanism that is able to resolve tension and trauma stored in the body. So David Berceli has had experience living in war-torn areas. What he discovered in, for example, bunkers where people were huddling, where they were hiding, is that many children would actually activate the tremor mechanism I've mentioned. They would start trembling, shaking off the accumulated stress, survival tension from the day, from the events that were occurring outside, like the explosions, like the conflict. They were actually tremoring this off, and after the event had passed, after their tremoring had completed, after their natural stress response had completed, they were able to return to a more relaxed, more comfortable, more engaged state. This was what inspired him to see whether that he could then replicate this in everyone else, whether you could get exercises that would reactivate this tremor mechanism in adults as well and allow them to draw on the same process to resolve the stored tension and trauma in their bodies. And that was how, through his experimentation, through his research, he was able to bring trauma release exercises to fruition as they are today. Because this tremor mechanism works beneath the level of the ego, beneath the level of the mind, it doesn't require control or even necessarily conscious direction. It is a largely automatic process that locates tension and trauma stored in your body and initiates tremoring in order to resolve them at the location in which they're stored, which then eventually leads to changes in the mind and well-being as trauma imprints are released from the body and no longer used by the nervous system. Over time, we'll see conditions like depression, we'll see issues like anxiety resolving, we'll see our mind become a much clearer, much more harmonious space. And the best thing about this is it doesn't require a clinician. It doesn't necessarily require another person to guide the process, because it is your body that knows how to do this. It is your body, that innate intelligence that knows how to resolve trauma, because this is an inherent mechanism that the body has, that we're all born with, that we're all capable of relearning and activating to help resolve our trauma. What if you think you don't need TRE? Well, in my opinion, the vast majority of people do need TRE. In my other videos, for example, I've argued that we are in a state of wide-scale nervous system dysregulation, where we're all stuck in survival states, where we're all playing out these trauma imprints at a subconscious level. And this is essentially stealing our joy away from us, making life much less vibrant, much less exciting. In addition to this, I've also noted the existence of ancestral trauma that we are inheriting from our ancestral lineage, trauma imprints that are activating now in our nervous systems that we are also continuing to play out. So many of us are ending up with dysregulated nervous systems even by default, despite otherwise having a high quality of life externally and being comfortable, having a good upbringing. We still can see people ending up in this sort of state. If you want to see these ideas covered in more detail, then I highly recommend you check out the videos I've been referencing here. What is trauma, really? As well as trauma is an epidemic. Now, with all these fundamentals discussed, how do we actually establish our own TRE practice? Well, to do this, we'll have to refer to the exercises that David Berceli developed. These exercises revolve primarily around fatiguing the psoas muscle in the hips, which is where the neurogenic tremors are believed to originate from. To do this, David Berceli recommends using the exercises wall sit and butterfly pose, as these will fatigue the psoas muscle and the legs and eventually allow the tremor mechanism to activate. Now, for some people, they'll struggle to activate this tremor mechanism. For example, in my experience, I was doing a lot of leg work at the gym, so my legs have become quite a bit stronger and it was much more difficult to fatigue them. In this case, it might take more warm-up exercises, or it might take a while to get to the point where the legs and hips are sufficiently fatigued to allow the tremor mechanism to activate. It's just about staying consistent primarily, and knowing that every human being has access to this tremor mechanism. It's an inherent part of us, and through enough dedication, through enough consistency, we can get it to activate eventually. We can relearn it eventually, because the body does have that inner knowing, that inner knowledge, that ability to self-regulate. Because what I found myself was that it took me multiple sessions over weeks before I finally was able to get my tremor mechanism to activate. I think the important thing to prioritize during the butterfly pose is to slowly move your legs together, lifting your hips, really trying to focus on fatiguing the psoas muscle and actually letting go of resistance you have to the process as well. So, for example, Berceli recommends constructing a relaxed, comfortable, low-pressure environment. He even recommends putting on a comedy show to sort of distract the ego so the tremor mechanism can take over. Just ensuring that there isn't too much expectation, there isn't too much pressure put on the nervous system to activate the tremor mechanism. But once you've gotten this the first few times, you won't even need the warm-up exercises anymore. Activating the tremor mechanism will become as natural to you as moving an arm or a leg, as blinking, as doing near enough anything else with your body. It will just become an intuitive mechanism, a reflex that you're able to activate when you want to draw upon it. In online TRE communities, and as per recommendation by Berceli himself, it is advised that people start with 15 minutes of practice of TRE every other day to ensure their nervous system doesn't get overwhelmed. It is important to remember that TRE practice draws on the same finite resources that, for example, physical activity does. That is, it can be very fatiguing and stimulating for the nervous system and is important to practice within your capacity. To determine your capacity, you want to see how your body reacts to the trauma release process in the moment, as well as the days following it. In the days following, do you notice signs of overdoing, like for example heavy fatigue, like anxiety, like brain fog? All these sorts of indications of the nervous system being overworked. So if you do experience these overdoing effects, it is highly recommended that you take a break of days or weeks to allow your nervous system to recover. Throughout your journey, your nervous system's capacity will also change. In some sessions, you may find trauma release comes very quickly. You'll encounter multiple releases in a session, happening in very short time spans. In other cases, for other people, it may take much longer for these same releases to occur, depending on what the tremor mechanism is trying to process, depending on your nervous system state and its level of activation. It is of utmost importance to ensure that you are managing your practice time and not overstimulating the nervous system. Make time for integration, for breaks, for healthy grounding activities, like for example walks, like for example nervous system regulation exercises, vagus nerve exercises. There's plenty of information you can find on these practices online. Ultimately, this process is about trusting your body, about being aware and in tune with your body's capacity for trauma release and respecting that. But what many people find is they're quickly able to tolerate more practice than, say, just the 15 minutes every other day. As nervous system capacity improves, as the nervous system gets used to the process, as it becomes more efficient. In this case, what many people will do is they shift their practice to daily. They gradually increase their practice time. Let's say they add a couple of minutes to that 15 minutes a session, so they're up to 17 minutes every couple of days, and then 19 minutes, and then 21 minutes, and then eventually perhaps working all the way up to 30 minutes a day, which is the upper bound of what is recommended in, for example, online TRE communities for daily trauma work using TRE. So just to show how variable the process can be, I, for example, started off on 15 minutes every couple of days as recommended, and then I shifted up to eventually 30 minutes daily with small incremental increases in practice time every session, increases in frequency in accordance with what my nervous system can manage. And then I also had, for example, the periods where I went down to only 3 to 5 minutes per session before I was already at capacity. It's always being aware of how your practice time can change throughout the process. It doesn't necessarily mean if you're doing less trauma work that it's going to be less efficient. A lot of the progress can be even made during these integration phases, during these breaks that I've mentioned. So if anything, these are arguably just as important as the actual trauma work sessions themselves, because the trauma is brought up, metabolized and processed by the nervous system during these breaks. It's absolutely essential to prioritize them. Now, naturally, when you are working with a very powerful modality like TRE, when you are releasing unprocessed trauma from your body, there are some very important precautions to keep in mind here. So because the process can be very overwhelming starting out for people with severe trauma, this may lead to lots of material coming up at once. Perhaps really distressing or destabilizing material can come up to the surface, and it is very important that there is someone else there to help regulate this process. So finding a TRE provider, finding a facilitator, someone who will provide a session you can go along to stay with you and to help you out and to help guide you through it and ensure things don't become too destabilizing is very important for people with high trauma loads, with childhood trauma, with conditions like PTSD, for example. Very, very important. Don't go straight into your practice without considering this first. It can have very severe implications. If you are a person who suffers from severe trauma, it is absolutely essential that you start off with a short practice time and work with a TRE provider. I'm talking a matter of minutes, in some cases under a minute, to really make sure you're able to handle it, to test your nervous system's capacity. But for the average person with a more average trauma load, the practice should be entirely safe to do at home on your own without needing to actively seek out a provider. Although receiving that guided instruction from a provider can be very valuable for certain people, and I would still encourage you to seek it out if you're willing to. Another important point to note is the cycle of re-traumatization. Now, David Berceli has mentioned this as well, and what it essentially involves is when our stored trauma is brought to the surface and faced instead of repressed, this can make us feel like we're almost re-experiencing it, or we're getting re-traumatized. Our mood drops. It can be difficult to really feel like we're making progress. It almost feels like we're regressing at times. But this is actually good news, because it means that the trauma imprint is essentially on its way out. This cycle of re-traumatization will occur throughout the process many times over, and it's important to stay grounded, to stay focused, and to know that it's only a temporary phase. It's the so-called final flare, I suppose, of a trauma imprint, the final stages before resolution. Some people may also struggle with physically demanding activities while engaging in trauma work, for example weightlifting, for example high intensity physical exercises. This is not the case for everyone, but for some people it can be very fatiguing, very straining for the nervous system, because as I said earlier, these sorts of things, they all draw from the same resources. So it's very important to keep that in mind, and to also moderate your physical activity in accordance with your nervous system capacity. So let's also discuss how the progression often looks during the TRE journey. And this is quite fascinating actually, because what many people find they experience during their early sessions of TRE is actually initial benefits, initial small benefits, like improved sleep, like reduced anxiety, like improved relaxation. And these can actually provide people with a bit of a motivator to continue on with their journey. But for others like myself, they don't really see a great deal of initial benefits. But it's important to remember that this doesn't necessarily mean that the practice isn't working, or that it's being completely ineffective. those benefits will eventually taper off into a state that seems to resemble slower progress. As the tremors in the nervous system dive deeper to resolve those trauma threads at a deeper level, the benefits of the practice can seem more unnoticeable, more long-term, more gradual than the initial benefits you may reap from the practice. This is why I often say that the ego is actually your greatest enemy on the trauma work journey, because your ego will continually try and convince you that perhaps you're not making progress, perhaps you're wasting your time, perhaps this whole thing is just complete nonsense. But in my experience, these are just defense mechanisms to sort of dissuade you from continuing on your journey, as trauma work seems to erode the foundations of the ego itself. If you think about it, really, there is no greater threat to the ego than to have its foundations directly attacked. So it makes sense why that voice in your head would get so defensive over your practice. But always remember that you don't need to listen to that voice, because the ego is rooted in familiarity, rooted in rigid patterns that continue to serve it, even if those patterns involve suffering. But you don't need to stay in these patterns yourself. You can find healing, you can find liberation, and that is why I'm bringing this video to you today, to provide you with that opportunity. I cover this in greater detail in my video, Trauma is an Epidemic. Ego influence could also manifest in trying to chase progress, trying to get results as fast as possible, so pushing you towards overdoing, having you worry about whether you're doing enough, or whether you can do more, or whether you're at capacity. And because you want to see that progress as fast as possible, you feel like you need to cram in as many sessions as possible, even though that can be less efficient and slow down progress dramatically by overburdening the nervous system. Now, these points I've raised about the ego are compounded by the common length of this journey. It is noted that the average person has such a high trauma load that it will take around 4 to 8 years of consistent TRE practice to resolve all of it. But this is the first modality that claims to actually be able to resolve all trauma, and this has been demonstrated by some members of online TRE communities, for example the longtermTRE subreddit. That is also where I got the 4 to 8 years figure from. So during the slower phases, it is important to stay committed, view the journey with a more long-term mindset, to celebrate gradual improvements in the process, to reflect on changes that you see in your well-being, in your life. Perhaps you're less stressed in certain situations, perhaps you're more able to deal with difficult people, perhaps you're noting persistently lower anxiety, perhaps your depressive episodes are beginning to fade away. Lots of potential benefits, lots of potential changes to note. So by the end of the journey, what sort of outcome should you expect? This is quite profound actually, because the nervous system will undergo a considerable transformation as it releases those old stored trauma imprints, and it allows itself to settle fully into a regulated state. Some examples of the improvements you may see in your life are reduced procrastination, the ability to be more comfortable in your body, the end of anxiety, the end of depression, the ability for life to feel more vibrant, more effortless, social presence improving, you feel more grounded, more secure in yourself. The body is pleasurable to be in, it is pleasurable to live life. Happiness is near enough a constant, just a natural part of you, instead of something you have to work really hard to attain. Any addictions you have will eventually resolve too. So this is why I emphasize the importance of the trauma work journey and committing to this healing path to regulating your nervous system, because it can just simply do so much for you. So I can provide a personal testimony to the effectiveness of TRE practice. I've been practicing TRE for around 1.5 years by now, and there's plenty I have to report on how much it has benefited me, my life, my well-being, as well as my approach towards other people. First of all, my ability to engage with others on an authentic level, to no longer mask socially, so to speak, to actually engage with them authentically and compassionately, has improved dramatically. Social interactions no longer feel like I'm putting on a show, no longer feel like they're forced, but rather just a channeling of my natural self and perception towards others. I used to experience a lot of loneliness. I used to suffer by myself. Now that no longer happens. I'm more content being independent. I'm more content being by myself and not needing other people around to provide that sense of validation. Furthermore, there are less insecurities I have to grapple with. I'm much more comfortable in my own skin. I'm much more comfortable expressing myself to others without pretenses, without agenda. I used to suffer from occasional mild depressive episodes, feeling low in mood, feeling hopeless some days, but now this hasn't happened for a very long time, so massive improvements there. In addition, my general level of anxiety has reduced quite significantly, particularly social anxiety. My ego in general has become a lot weaker. I now act more for the benefit of others instead of strictly for myself. It is less about the validation I receive and more about what I can do for other people, because I feel more content as myself, and am much more neutral in the face of rejection or negativity. I am able to handle and weather these situations with much less stress and often without even having a negative emotional reaction. So in this state, arguments and conflict are dissolved much easier, because you don't have that instinctual drive to become defensive, to really escalate the situation. My life has become happier from a relational point of view as well because of this. I also have less resistance to life and how it plays out in general. I feel a lot calmer. I feel like I have a lot less stress towards events that occur throughout my life now. I also have periods of happiness, gratitude, peace, relaxation that all appear spontaneously, but will eventually become my natural baseline state, as it can for you as well. So that's it for the information I'm going to provide for now, although there are many other sources of material you can draw upon to learn more about TRE and to inform your practice. For example, there is the longtermTRE subreddit, in which the moderator is very active and has posted a lot of resources on there for you to access. You can also go on the subreddit, post your own threads, ask questions, and people will be very helpful there and aid you in your practice. What you'll also find there is the wiki page, which will take you through much of the information that has been outlined in this video, but with much more information in greater detail than even I have provided here. So if you are serious about starting your TRE practice, I would highly recommend you check out that wiki page as well. While I do recommend instead reaching out on the longtermTRE subreddit, feel free also to contact me on Discord if you are struggling with your TRE practice and perhaps need some advice. You'll also be able to find David Berceli's YouTube channel, which will provide a wide range of varying content for you to draw upon throughout your TRE practice. He has guided sessions, he has demonstrations, he has explanations, plenty of useful stuff there. You also have his official website, treglobal.org, which will give you further resources to draw upon. All the resources mentioned here will be linked in the description. If you want to learn more about trauma in general, there are many books you can read as well. For example, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Berceli himself has also written many books around similar topics and around TRE in particular. When the Body Says No by Gaber Mate is another fantastic book to draw upon. If you're looking for a deeper dive into ancestral trauma, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen could be a good read as well. There's plenty out there for you to discover, to find, to educate yourself with. This video should be seen, I suppose, as just the start of your journey. I do hope this video and the information provided here has been of great benefit to you though. Thanks a lot for stopping by, and I wish you the absolute best of luck on your healing journey if you do decide to undertake it. Remember, it is entirely free, entirely accessible to you, with no course, no money required, just an inherent tremor mechanism that you can draw upon whenever you like. It's worth a shot. It doesn't take anything from you after all. So, at least entertain the possibility. Thank you very much for watching. Alright, this has been Fol. Do me a favour and have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember that you are an amazing person who deserves all the good that the world throws at you. Goodbye. I hope to see you again soon.